Current mode. Oh, sorry about that. So loud. Okay, all right, we're recording. Hi, Genesis. Okay. All right, so we are going to go to Canvas. We'll let everybody, oh, there's no internet. Oh. I forgot that my wireless does not, I'm going to grab the internet off of this computer. Uh-oh, how do I, oh goodness. I forgot, I don't think I ever configured my wireless. I'm going to grab this guy though. Internet connection. Come here. Okay, let's see if that works. I'm a little bit kind of far away though. I just hope it'll let me pull just a little bit further. I think that's fine. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm connected now. Let's try that again. Oh gosh, it's actually working. Okay. Just make sure I'm connected. Cool. I'm just gonna pull you a little bit further. Okay. Wasn't that supposed to be Canvas? What happened there? How bizarre. Didn't I try? All right, Canvas. Courses. $2.99. Yeah, this one. Let's start with the practice database. So go to Files, Data Analysis Documents. How do we tell Genesis? Normally we would, I'm going to save this to the desktop. I'm going to do this for you, Genesis, so you can see. I have SPSS on my computer, but I think you need to go through ZenWorks. I don't even have ZenWorks. We'll walk you through it, Genesis, another day, because my computer is a little bit different. I have the privilege of just sort of opening up databases like on my laptop, but you guys have that extra step that's in the data analysis handout of going through ZenWorks, right? Saving the file locally, and then opening up SPSS and going in that way. Otherwise, you guys won't be able to open things. Still going?
I'm still trying to log on. This computer is still
Yeah, we'll open one more too. Goodness. Edson, are you in?
Yeah.
Okay. I might actually just maybe, right, we'll sort of look on with Kelly and then we'll keep these. Oh, you don't either?
No, it won't load for me.
What's happening? Ralph, do you have it?
Yes.
So it's just these.
It took forever.
All right. We're going to let these, maybe Gianna, I would try to launch a few more. Yeah, and then maybe we might shift you, but for now we might just ask you to look on with somebody else, right? So we can at least, some of the background stuff you guys can do. How about, are there data collection stuff that we need to talk about? Everybody's been handing in folders, you guys are getting into spaces, right? Outside of people not really showing up, right? Too many people, yeah.
A quick question, because this is something we've encountered. Like, somebody will show up like an hour early and be like, "Oh, I signed up for like the 11:45 one, but I'm here now. Can I do it now? Like, what do we do?"
Yes, and it's actually yours. Does it happen to be yours? So that's probably an easy scenario, right? So Ralph's asking about if somebody shows up early and you have two consecutive. If you have space, you could let them take it during that initial one, right? Because you're already there and they're already in your system, right? For Piper. So let them sign up, and then when you assign credit, right, you don't even have to move them, right? Just keep a note of it in your own. The Piper sign sheet, they'll be on the early one. Maybe send us a note or something, because the names will be off, but you just assign them in that next slot. That's not an issue. It has happened, though, before where people just show up, right, and they're not signed up for your study, and in those cases, it's happened a couple of times. It's fine as long as you guys have space. What'll happen is that you just need to create a slot for them. Right, because once the Piper session starts, they can't actually go in and sign up for it anymore. And so this is what we've done is if you're going to send them an email, say we created a slot for you, and make it like 2 days in advance, and it's like a weird time, like 3 a.m., right, on like November 2nd, email the person and say we created a spot specifically for you, this date, this time. All they need to do is sign up for them. When they do, you can assign them credit. Somebody may accidentally, this happens, right, because it's like, really, you're going to come to a 3 a.m. appointment November 2nd? Well, people sometimes don't even notice the time, right? They're like, oh, it's 3 p.m. if that happens, you can see their name and it's not the right person, just email them and say, actually, that was reserved for somebody else, right? Because we have an hour and 20 minutes, too, up until the time. We deleted you. Unfortunately, this is, somebody else needs to take that slot. And you'd say, it's all right, right? And then we can always give them credit, right? So if that happens and you're having any problems, you guys can get in touch, and we'll just make sure that that happens, that sets up. Other than that, it seems like, yeah, I mean, these things always happen. These kind of, there hasn't been any ethical stuff that's come up, though, and all right, people coming in. Bless you. All right. So let me just make sure we're still recording. Yep. I know, right? This is just in the background. So this is eventually what you guys are going to get, right? Like something that looks like this. You'll download it from Qualtrics. What you won't see, though, is everything all sort of neatly in place for you, right? What will happen is you'll have all these weird, like, start time, end time, ID codes, stuff that we probably won't use. And your variable names won't look nice and pretty like that. It'll probably be like Q1, Q12, Q96, right? It's basically just a number that Qualtrics is going to give it. So where you guys see right now, like ID, gender, arrest, IQ, I mean, we created those, and you guys will do the same, right? So we'll just do a quick tutorial. I'm guessing right? So just to remind you guys, when you open up SPSS, what views you have, and then we'll run through some of this stuff. So we'll skip the download data from Qualtrics. We're not doing that quite yet. And then we'll start with number 3 on page 1, like familiarize yourself with SPSS format. Right, so if you guys remember, there's 2 views, right? And then you guys will play around with this stuff too. And maybe hopefully if you have it, you could toggle yourself and just sort of follow along and play in the database. Oh, and then maybe like, how about on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 is like maybe you actively use it in a lab or something. You regularly use SPSS. Is anybody in that category of like 7 to 10 where you sort of use this program on a regular basis? Okay, no, right? Any mid-range where you like feel generally like you could probably go in and run some descriptives, maybe look at a couple of things, maybe, okay, good, got a couple in there. And then everybody else is safe to say, like, it's been a long time, and this is you're sort of looking at it for the first time in a long time. Probably around there. Okay, good. So that's really helpful. So as a reminder, right, there's 2 views. Data view, and then this variable view, right? You can just toggle back and forth like this. Oh, Jackie, you're in.
Yeah, I got
okay, good. And Kelly, are you in? Oh, look at that. Okay. Variable view, right, in this one, the rows represent actual variables. Right? So things that, like your database that you're going to create, like GPA, extroversion, right? Each of those will end up as a line here, if you look in your own database too. And then you can give it characteristics, right? Like sometimes they're going to be numeric. Most of yours are going to be numeric. The only time it's not, sometimes you're going to have these like maybe a string variable. And string is basically when somebody can just type in a response, like a written text, right? Like in a Qualtrics, and then it's just going to show up just like that. With decimals, right? Sometimes we'll need to shift those. Labels, Qualtrics will suck down for you whatever you call the item. So when you wrote the name, like, if it's like a parenting variable, my mother tells me she loves me, this fortunately will come right from Qualtrics for you, so it's nice, right? So you'll be able to see kind of what the variable is, but this won't be nicely organized, right? It won't say parenting 1, it'll probably say like Q12, right, or Q13. What Qualtrics also does, but sometimes messes up, is these values. So whatever you guys put in the Qualtrics system for strongly agree, disagree, strongly consistent, inconsistent, whatever those were, it will pull all of that for you, which is really nice, right? So they're just going to pop up in these values. Ideally, these are labeled things like 1, 2, 3, 4. Qualtrics sometimes does something like this, and you'll see, for some reason it labels these like weird numbers, right? Like 7, 9, 11, 13. You can leave those, but the tough thing is like when you're just trying to look at descriptive information about your variables, trying to remember all these different labels, like numbers, it gets confusing, right? So if you've got one that does 7, 9, 11, 13, and you've got one that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and you create like, I don't know, like average scores of stuff, it gets all screwy, right? It's sort of hard to know what those values mean. But if everything is scaled nicely, 1, 2, 3, 4, when you take an average score, you kind of know what a 2 means, right? You kind of know what a 3 means. It means maybe either agree or disagree. Yeah, anyways.
I'm downloading the data from Canvas. I redid it.
Yeah.
It's like not working. Like like I'm not getting what you have.
Mm.
I'm getting from Canada. Yeah.
Look like this?
No, not
Oh, you do.
But like,
And it's called 299 practice data set?
this is the other one. Oh, this is classic.
Yes, no, that's probably the one from the assignment. Go through the files, and then there's a folder called, yes, data analysis documents. That's the one you want to grab. Let's give it a second, yeah. The other one you will use when you do the assignment, but that has so few variables in it. We're giving everybody a minute, Genesis, to get their other databases set up. So hot. Wait till everybody.
Wait, Professor Chen,
Yes.
can I open the, like, if I have this on, can I just open it, it'll come up and we'll add 6 and keep this, and then just like,
You mean?
no, it'll open it.
That's like the
Yes.
ideal. Once you stay in it if you want to. So you would you be open when you open it? Technically, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be another, it'll be a separate floor.
Yeah.
Messy.
Technically, it would be.
Anybody still trying?
Yeah. I have one, just like option. We take 2 classes. I don't know if I can do lab in the fall of next year, maybe.
I'll get a pen and mark these off as we go. Good? All right. And Aaron, you're opening. All right, good. So we'll come back to this, but this is the variable view, right? So you can actually see all the different things that are happening with each variable, right? And each one gets its own row. If we go to data view, now the variables are in columns, right? And each of the rows represents a person, like participant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now when you look across, it's basically for participant 1, here are, right, the information from Qualtrics that they gave, like gender, in this case, delinquency, peer total, right, arrest, IQ. So sometimes if you're working, if you have a pretty big database, and let's say you're like looking at like this variable parenting 1, and you're like, oh, I kind of want to like understand a little bit more about this variable, I forgot. You can hover over, see what I'm doing? I'm sort of just like right over the name, and we'll give you some basic stats, right? Like the name of it, the label, numeric. Sometimes that's helpful. If you double click on it, it will actually toggle you to the other sheet. So, right, it should. Right, and I double clicked on it, and it sort of shifted me to the variable view, right to that variable. So sometimes you kind of want to go back and forth and look at stuff. I don't think you can do that. Unfortunately, you can't go back that way. Oh, yes, you can. Yes, if you double click, it toggles you back. The other thing is when you're in this view, you can right click on the variable names. And sometimes you get all sorts of like helpful things here. Like every now and then, like you'll see in these instructions somewhere I say sort the variable by like ascending or descending, because sometimes you just want to see a list of things. And you could do that by just right clicking on that particular variable you want to see. And if you want to do sort ascending, it sort of reorganizes, and the data moves with the person, right? So that each row kind of moves together. It doesn't kind of rearrange stuff. But now, for this particular variable, because I sorted ascending, right, all the low values are here, and sometimes you want to be able to see stuff, right? So sometimes that's helpful. Okay. I'm going to go back into variable view. Sometimes these things don't appear for you, but there are these like hidden little boxes, right? So right now when you look at the values, you're like, oh, how do you get there? You basically just have to hover to the right of it, and if you click it, it appears. It sort of doesn't live there on its own, right? But just know that there are these little boxes that you can, I'm going to edit this because it should say strongly agree, right? So I'm going to add a T there. I'm going to change that. Clearly I was doing this very quickly because this one's not right either. Strong. Lee. All right, I'm gonna change that. Okay, great. You can open and close these because sometimes it's easier to see, right? If you need to like make this bigger, it's like an Excel spreadsheet, right? You can, as soon as you get that arrow, you can, right? You know, you might want to do that sometimes. That's helpful. Convert string to numeric, Piper demographics survey question about major. Oh, I don't think I'm going to demo that right now. We'll come back to that one. Always check to make sure that the values listed in SPSS make sense for your scale. We'll do things like that when we run like descriptive. So if you looked here in this parenting 1 variable, I did this on purpose, but when I sorted this, it turns out that like 3 people have these very high scores that probably aren't valid, 22, 33, 43. So this is a function of like, we got to figure out what happened to those, right? Like, is it that people just might have, if you got this from Qualtrics, chances are somebody entered the wrong info, right? But it may be something that you can fix. You might have to just delete these. We'll make those decisions later. All right, but when we do descriptive stuff for all of our stuff, you guys will be able to take a closer look at those things. All right, a couple shortcuts. There are going to be times when I tell you, like when you organize your database, it's really helpful to organize them in ways where the variables that you're actually going to use in your analyses are kind of grouped together. I like them at the front of the database because what you'll see is there's a whole bunch of noise in your database, things that actually you're not going to analyze, but you use in the process of trying to create the variables that you're going to use, right? And so I like to leave the noise kind of at the end of the database and move only things I need up front because you're going to be running a whole bunch of analyses, and it's much easier to have them like accessible all like together right at the beginning. Otherwise, you're hunting right throughout a database trying to find stuff. It's really a sort of a waste of time, and that's how you make errors, right? So in SPSS, you can do it individually. So let's say I wanted this gender variable up next to this other gender 1 variable. In variable view, right, you can highlight the whole row, and once it's highlighted, you can click on it, and a little red line appears. See that? And then you can shift it wherever you want, right? So I prefer this than copying and pasting them, right? Because it's very easy to sort of delete something and forget about it. And then it disappears, right? So I can basically where the red line goes is where you'll dump it. There are these shortcuts where you can do multiple. So let's say you wanted, you wanted this one, and then I'm going to hit Control. You want this one. You want this one. You like that one, right? And you want to move all of them. So I'll let go now, and I'll click, and I can shift them all at the same time too, right? So there's all sort of tricks like that. And you can do shift buttons. This works in a lot of SPSS, right? So it works here, but also when you're like picking variables to put in analyses, you can use these functions, right? So I'm going to click this. I'm going to hit my shift button. I'm going to click the last one, and all of them get highlighted, right? So the difference between using a shift versus a control, right, for different ones. And you guys will play around with this like this. It just makes, right, it makes it easier to kind of navigate stuff. And then the helpful shortcuts. Almost everything that you guys can do in Microsoft Word as shortcuts, you can do here. So like this variable view, this label here, I'm going to change it, right, because already I know that I don't want this, 7, 9, 11, 13. What I'm going to do is I never, ever, ever change the original data, right? So when you guys create your databases, whenever you're going to make any changes, just don't overwrite the variables. Always create a new one, right? Because there are going to be times where you need to like cross-check, and you'll be like, well, let's look at what the original was. I think I recoded this wrong. If you don't have the original, right, you just won't know, and at that point, everything gets all messed up, right? You're like, oh, I think I recoded it twice, maybe 3, and then, so keep the original, and then you can create a new variable. So you can right-click, you can insert new variables, and you'll do this for different things. And I'm just going to call this parenting 1 underscore. It won't take hyphens. It doesn't take spaces. It doesn't let you do any of that. RE. For me, that's recoded. That's always my, right? And I know I'm not going to, I could, if you want, if this is helpful for you, you could copy this and paste this too, right? So you know kind of what the variable is. You could do a Control-C, right? Or you can right-click, copy. All of those functions are the same. And then right here, you can just paste it, right? Mom tells me. I do a Control-V, or you can right-click and paste, right? You could do that with just about everything except variable names. SPSS will never ever let you duplicate a variable name, right? So if you try to copy and paste in that column in particular, it'll say illegal, right, action or something. You always have to have a different variable name. And then what I'm going to do is, oh, I should have done something different. Hold that thought, right? But just know the copy and paste functions. And I'll show you this. So if you have a set of values that you've created and you liked, you can actually use that same shortcut. You can Control-C, and you can Control-V, and all the values just, right? So you don't have to redo them, right? So if you got one set up, you can always redo it. I'm going to do it a slightly different way to show you. So I'm going to delete this for now, right? Because that's not the best way to create new variables, so it's just clear. But just to show you guys kind of what you can do with copy and paste, all of that. And Control-Z, Control-Y. Right, so if you accidentally do something and you want to undo it, I don't know if you guys use Control-Z. I use it a lot. Sometimes you're going so fast, and then right? So Control-Z will just sort of undo your last. And then there's usually this one too, right? One of these two arrows up here do the same thing for you guys, like undo and do. Toggle between variable names and variable. Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. So one more thing, and then we'll recode. So let's say I want to run a descriptive on my variables. Like I'm going to do it on parenting 1 because I know that there's some weird stuff happening in there. And I'm just going to go analyze descriptives. I'm going to do descriptives because frequencies will tell you, right, like how many times a certain value got endorsed. I'm not really interested in that. At this point, I just want to see if there's any values that fall out of the range of like what we think should be the values, right, for this variable. So I'm going to go to descriptives. And there's 2 ways you can see this stuff that's helpful. Sometimes you can just do this and see the variable names, whichever this is, right? Gender, gender 1, gender. Some people, though, like to see the values, right? Because sometimes it's easier to identify the variables you need. And when you're in this column here, you can right-click, and you can choose whether you display by names or display by labels. Right? So sometimes, depending on how you guys label your stuff, right now it's just the actual names of it. And if you toggle back, you get a little bit more info, right? So it'll actually like write out the name of whatever like question, right? So sometimes it helps to go back and forth. And let's say I'm just going to grab parenting 1. Oh, see, right now I forgot what that was even, right? Because now you have to do this. So I'm going to toggle back to variable names because I'm sort of used to seeing it that way. And like I said, you can grab a whole bunch if you want. I'm going to hit Shift and grab all of these, or not. You can grab specific ones by hitting Control. Same thing applies, right? For now, I'm just going to grab parenting 1. I'm going to put it over here in this box. I want to run a descriptive on it. I'm going to hit OK. And then whenever you run anything in SPSS, you get an output, right? This output window. And the output file will always run behind the scenes, right? So anytime you open SPSS, one will get triggered. And then when you run descriptives, analyze, compute, code, it dumps in here always. So it's almost like a running log, right, of everything that you're doing and all the mistakes that you make, right? It's all right in here. And at some point, you'll get a clean one. But if you look at this, it looks like there's a minimum, right? N is how many participants? This, we're just looking at 50 of them. Minimum of 2, 43 of max. And clearly, like, that's not what we wanted, right? So we know our scale is supposed to be 1 to 4, let's say. So something went wrong. So then you can go back to the database and figure out what participant is a 43 value, and then figure out what you might do with it, right? So if that kind of stuff happens for you guys, you'll just come, right? We'll help you figure out what you may do with those data points. Qualtrics helps with not letting that kind of stuff happen, right? Because they're sort of forced to pick off in like one of, right, like 4 choices or something, but it can happen. All right, so that's descriptives. Let's move on to syntax files and recoding, because I'm guessing everybody's going to have to do that at some point. Has anybody used syntax files in 203 or any other data class? Oh no, they change your life, right? It's like, so basically, a lot of times when you do SPSS, most of you probably have had the experience where you do it this way, drop-down menus, right, where you analyze stuff, descriptives, you might correlate things, right? But syntax is basically the code that runs behind that to let you do that. It tells SPSS what to do without necessarily drop-down menus. The nice thing about syntax is that you you can run it, like once you create the syntax for it, you basically just have to run it each time, right? So if you need to run a recode statement multiple times on different databases, you can just run the syntax and not have to every time do analyze, right, this, and hunt for stuff. So it's sort of like your own command file, right, that runs in the background. So we're going to show you how to do that in a minute, because you're going to use that for a bunch of stuff that you do. Before we do it, though, let's talk a little bit about recoding, right? So turn to page, turn to page 7. So this is that self-esteem measure we've talked about before. Did anybody use this one in their projects? I can't remember. Nobody ended up using this one? All right. So, right, there's 10 statements. And whenever you guys create your variables, we're going to suggest, right, we keep saying this, but we're going to suggest that everything gets coded so that higher scores reflect higher levels of the measure. And that's just going to be easier for you to always wrap your head around stuff, right? Like when you're looking at correlations, when you're looking at any kind of like statistics, if you know that everything is always coded, so higher levels, higher numbers, it just makes it easier, right? That you can interpret what positive effects mean, negative effects, right? And so in this case, the way this is coded, right, because that's what Rosenberg said you should do, is a strongly agree is a 3, agree is a 2, right, disagree is a 1, and strongly disagree is a 0. So in this case, anytime somebody responds with a strongly agree to that statement, right, they're going to get a higher score, because right now the way it's coded is a 3, right? And so basically we just read each statement and try to understand if that's the way we want it to be coded, or if you want to switch anything, right? Because it may be in some cases where the way the question's worded, lower scores are indicative of higher levels of self-esteem. Does that make sense, right? So how about everybody, and obviously, I mean, I bolded the ones, right? So we sort of answer this question for you. But if you look at like question 1, right, I feel that I'm of a person of worth, at least on equal plane with others. If someone answers strongly agree, that's high, like, right, higher levels of self-esteem. So I kind of like that one. I'm going to leave it. But if you go to number 3, all in all, I'm inclined to feel that I'm a failure. A person with higher levels of self-esteem is probably going to go strongly disagree to that, right, and answer it. But then they're going to get a score of 0, which is not indicative of higher, right, in terms of like the scaling of that measure. So for that question, we basically just reverse code. So we keep the original measure as it is, but then we recode, right, item number 3 and say, I'd like all values that are 3 to now be given a score of 1, all values that are 2 to be given a score of 1. I'm sorry. Strongly agree, 3 becomes a 0, right? I'm just sort of reversing it. 2 agree becomes a 1, disagree 1 becomes a 2, strongly disagree becomes a 3. So that's pretty much it, right? And then you just go through your measure and try to identify the ones that need that kind of recoding. And then you look at your database, and then you just figure out how you got to switch the numbers. So I won't go through all of this, right? But you can read this after the fact. But basically what's going to happen is if Qualtrics gives you this, we just need to recode that, right, so that the numbers represent what we want them to represent. And so if we're going to use this as an example, we want anything for this variable. Well, let's see. Strongly agree, the person answered 7. Strongly disagree is a 13. So if the question is, Mom tells me she loves me, and this is supposed to be about like parental warmth or something, right, this particular measure. Strongly agree, right, or actually the higher scores on this, right? Higher levels of parental warmth, right? So if I'm going to scale this as a 1, 2, 3, 4, because that's just easier for me to always sort of remember things as 1, 2, 3, 4, then I need this question for a strongly agree, anybody who gets a 7 to then get what score? It's got to be a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1. Let's think. Mom shows me she cares. If somebody answers strongly agree, right, that suggests high parental warmth. You want that to be the highest number on the scale. 4, right? So I'm going to code all 7s to 4. I'm going to code 9s to 3. I'm going to code the 11s to 2. And I'm going to code the 13s to 1. Does that make sense? And that's only because the way that this is, Qualtrics dumped this out for me, and I don't like this, the 7, 9, 11, 13. So I just want to make sure that these translate to numbers that I can use, but I want them to be scaled in ways where higher is, right? So you don't have to understand all of it quite yet, right? But just, so the best way to do this, and this is why I write it down, right? Because it's so easy to not, right? And then you get somebody to look at it, like, I can't tell if my brain's working right. Could you just look at this for me and make sure these numbers are right? Once you feel good about it, the recode statement, and this is all in here, the handout, right? We're going to do a transform, recode into a different variable. There is one for same variable. That is not what we want, right? Because that will just recode that original variable, and then you'll be left with the recoded, and you'll lose the, right, the original. If you choose recode into a different variable, essentially it will create a brand new variable for you, kind of like I did manually, but this will be it. So we're going to recode into a different variable. And the variable that I'm going to recode, I'm going to just start with just this first one, right? Parenting, I'm going to toggle this again. Parenting 1, I'm going to stick it over here. And it wants a name for the output. And like I said before, I like to just call it by the original parenting 1 underscore RE. So that's I always know that that's the recode, right? You can put a label if you want. I usually know, you can always go back to the original and look what that label is, so I'm not too concerned about that. And then you have to hit change, because it'll be like, okay, I got it. Now I'm going to change parenting 1 into this parenting 1 recode for you. And then you tell SPS what values you want, right? So I'm going to click old and new values. And now I look at my, right, so I'm going to make a 7. I'm just tabbing over, or you could, right, move your cursor over there. I'm going to make that a 4. I'm going to add it. My next one, I'm going to do a 9. I'm going to make that a 3. Add it. Right, 11. Make that a 2. And then 13, let's make that a 1. I'm like, okay, that looks pretty good. 4 values. And there are some where if it's like a 5, like an odd numbered, sometimes you get that one in the middle that doesn't change, like a neutral, like a 3. You still have to tell the system what to do with it. Otherwise, every time there's a 3 and you don't tell it what to do with the 3, it's just going to leave it blank, right? And you'll just get a whole bunch of missing data for that 3. So you'll be like 3, change to 3, right? So that way you get an actual response for each of them. Once this looks good, right, you hit continue. And instead of you could hit OK at this point. And basically, SPSS will run that for you. It'll dump all new variables, any new commands. SPSS always dumps it at the very end of the file, right? So that's where you're going to go to look for it. But instead of running it from here, we're going to paste it. And when you hit paste, it creates this syntax file for you. This is the command stuff that goes in the background, and you can save these, right? So as you guys create syntax, you just keep dumping them in here, and then inevitably you will always be rerunning, like you'll be like, oh, I think we changed something, let's rerun that variable. If you have the syntax file, all you gotta do is rerun it, right? You don't have to sort of figure out what you need to do next. Whenever we create these syntax files, I usually like to create like notes in here to sort of keep track of what this stuff is. Otherwise, it's just you have to kind of look at all this stuff and figure it out. So anytime you put a note in syntax files, I think it's this. We'll get an error message if it's not. It's a /. I always think about it as forward because it looks like the slash is like falling forward. Right? That's the way I kind of remember. He's like sort of / and then, I'm sorry, an asterisk. And SPSS knows that is like that's a comment. That's not actually like a command I need to run, right? If you don't put that in front of it, it'll try to run it like an execute command, and then you'll get a bunch of error messages. Like, I don't know what to do with the text, And then I just usually put a label, right? Like created, you don't have to get this word, just, by Prof. Chung. Maybe recoded parenting variables or something, right? Yes, and sometimes you put the date, right? So anything, because you guys are going to be working together in groups, anything that can sort of help you remember, right? Because sometimes you want to be like, who created that variable? Like, what'd you do with it? November 1 or something, right? Anything that will help you guys. So now that you have the execute command, and you can see, right? Like the cool thing about syntax also is that this is pretty easy to recreate, right? So you could do it multiple ways. Well, let's just do this one first, then I'll show you. So, right, I'm going to highlight it. You can either hit the green arrow button to run it, or you can hit the run and then run the selection, right? There are also always multiple ways to go about doing the stuff in SPSS. I'm going to run it. In the output, if there's any kind of error, you'll get it, right? It'll be like something went wrong, your command's kind of funky. But if everything looks, there's no error messages, right? The output looks like pretty good. And then I go back to the database, and I go to the very end. I'm going to go to data view, right? Because that's sort of, and you'll see it dumped it here. Oh, the problem was that, at least in mine, I made up a fate values, right, for that, just to show you by, because that's sort of what's in the handout. But if you really look here next to the variable, and sometimes this is what I do. You can drag things here. I like to just drag it next to it, right, just while I'm looking at it, because you can easily inspect, right? This is the original variable. This is the recoded. Sometimes you just want to look back and forth. Clearly, there are no values that are 7, 9, 11, 13, right? And because there weren't, SPSS couldn't do anything with it, right? So in this case, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4 already, there are some things that need to be recoded, right? Because the scaling is switched, but the numbers are a little bit off, right? So if I looked here, mom shows me she cares. I should probably have done it the other way so you guys could see. Mom yells at me a lot. I'm going to change this so you guys, you don't have to do this, but just for, gosh, it's so loud, descriptive purposes. I don't know if that'll help, but change, wait, 4, 3, strongly agree, disagree, right? And then strongly disagree. Let's assume that this is really what it is, right? Strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree. And in this case, 4 is strongly agree. And I'll look at the question. Mom tells me she loves me. Someone who answers a 4, strongly agree. That feels like high levels of parental warmth, right? So I probably wouldn't recode that, right? But if I go to parenting 2, and let's say it's using the same variable labels, I'm going to copy these here and here and here. Oh, you can't do that. Copy, paste, copy, paste. I'm going to bring number 3 back so we're all together. Mom yells at me a lot. In this case, right, I want the strongly disagree responses to be the higher score, right? So this one I would switch. 1 equals 4, 2 equals 3, 3 equals 2, 4 equals 1, right? And get a recoded statement for that. The next one, I can never understand. Oh, mom shows me she cares. This seems to be the right scaling. Strongly agree would get higher scores, right? And then I can never understand how my mom feels about me. I would recode those so that when all is said and done, and you use the recoded statements for 2 and 4, the originals for 1 and 3. If you were going to like create a score, right, of parental warmth, you could either average those 4 scores, you could sum those 4 scores, right? But the higher scores would reflect, right, higher levels. And you always use the recoded variables, right? So if you're going to create them because you need to switch the scaling, those are the ones you use then to create total scores of something, right? Okay. I think maybe we should do that then, real quick. The process is the same as in here, but let's go through the steps. And you guys practice on your own, because this is basically what the homework assignment is, but with a different set of variables, right? So everybody maybe take a few seconds and practice recoding. So do what I did, right? Sort of maybe make these, and you could do this manually, right? The 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't necessarily have to like recode. You could go right into that, it's okay, the parenting 1, and make them these instead of 7, 9, 11, 13. And then just practice sort of transforming and recoding the ones that need to be recoded into different variables. Right? And then call us over if, so I'm going to do this again. I'm going to make old and new values remove, because these are not the ones I want to change. Cancel. Parenting 1 seems okay, actually, so I'm not even going to do that one. Reset. But parenting 2, right, I'm going to transform, recode into a different variable. I'm going to call it parenting 2. And if you prefer just to watch, right, just watch. You don't have to, but if you like to actually try it, you can do it along with me. parenting to recode. I'm going to change that. I'm going to make 1, 4, oops, 2, and if you notice any errors I'm making, right, obviously, I think I'm doing it right, 3 into 2, 4 into 1, paste. And then 4. And let me show you one other thing. Whenever you go into that recode statement, you'll see that the previous one always just lives there until you reset it, right? So right now, the parenting to statement's still here. What you could do is, right, in the same statement, it lets you add multiple, right? So if you have multiple ones that need that same recode statement, because parenting 4 is, right, another one too. I'm going to go here. You got to give it a new name, parenting 4, oops, no spaces, recode, change. These are all the same, right? So you don't have to even change this because it still lives that way. 1, 2, 3, 4 becomes 4, 3, 2, 1. You continue. You could paste it. And if you look in the syntax, it's just going to dump another recode statement. And what you see is you don't need both of these anymore. Anytime you have multiple variables that are using the same recode statement, this is the syntax. It basically lists the originals, it lists what you want to recode, and then it lists the new variable names, right? So I'm going to get rid of this. And now that you know that, it might even be easier, right? You could just copy, let's say there was a 6. I'm just going to paste that, make that 6. I'm going to take that, copy that, make that 6. Add my period. You know what I mean? Like, you can manipulate this statement now that you know what the recode syntax statement is. Sometimes it's easier than actually going back, file, write down, hunt, peck. And the more you do this, the more you'll realize, oh, just, sometimes I'll just manipulate this file, right? So I'm going to take those 6s out because that wasn't what it needs. I'm hitting Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, and then I'm going to run it. And hopefully this time, there'll actually be data that pops out, right? Output file looks good. There are no error messages in here. Double click here. Oh, did I miss a 1? Parenting 4. Oh no, this is just missing data, right? Anytime there's dots, it just so happens, right? For these people, participant 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, right? Just never answered that question. So now you're stuck with sort of missing data here. But if you line these up, this one next to 2, oops, I sometimes do that, right? This one next to 4. I just eyeball, right? Because I want the 3s to become 2s. I want the 1s to become 4. I want the 3s to become 2, right? So sometimes it's spot checking, making sure that's doing what you want. You don't have these big chunks of missing data when you think you should, right? That's all data analysis, right? It's all about just, because it's so easy. It'll do whatever you want it to do. It'll run whatever command you want. But if your data are faulty, right, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So it's always up to us to just kind of make sure that the data look good. All right, any questions about that process? Ralph?
For the missing data that's there, do we just leave it then?
I think we probably will. What's going to happen is, if you have like a 10-item measure, and let's say for some reason almost everybody just didn't answer question 8 or something, there are things, like really when you look at it, you often will make decisions about what to do. Sometimes we can impute values for those. There's all sorts of fancy things. I think for our purposes, we will note anything that has big chunks of missing data. So when you run descriptives, you'll be able to see, right? So maybe one variable has 200 responses, but another variable only has 12, right? So we'll be able to see those, and then we'll decide. But for now, we're just going to kind of leave them as missing. And then we will compute these kind of overall scores. So before we do that, I'm going to check in and see if this stuff feels okay, right, in terms of making sense of it, doing it on your own. And we'll be here to float, obviously, and help you run through stuff. Pretty good. Okay. A lot of you have these multi-item measures, and you're not going to use individual items in your analysis, right? The idea is that people created those measures, right, so that there's sort of 10 items that represent one larger construct, right, of something. So then we'll use this information to create that right, that score. So in this case, let's assume it's parenting, and I want for each participant to create like a parental warmth score. And I think some of you will know because when people talk about their measures, like previous researchers, they'll say, in order to compute a score, please like average the scores, right? Or please sum them, right? There's some way. A lot of you sort of already put this in your measures section. If they don't say anything about that, we're just going to assume we're going to average them, right? So when you guys get to your own data and you don't know if it's sum or average, we're just going to, right, average score. So that's basically saying, like, take these parental 1, 2, 3, 4 and tell me overall what the warmth score is like for that person. And when you do that, if you've ever recoded everything, you want to make sure you use those recoded variables, right? Because otherwise it flips again, and then the total score gets all, it's not reflective of what you're actually trying to get. So to do that, we're going to go, I think it's transform. Yep, transform. Oh, sorry. When I do things like this, and it's up to you too how many variables you have, but I will often put the things that I need together so I don't kind of mess things up. So I'll put the recoded 4, I'll put the 3, I'll put the recoded 2, and then I'll put the 1 next to each other, right? So recoded, original 1. So now, right, at the 4 at the end is 1, 2 recoded, 3, 4 recoded, right? So everything, these 4 are the ones I want to use when I'm going to be doing like computations of total scores and stuff. So I just like to do that so I don't mess up. It's so easy to kind of mess up stuff, right? When you're running stuff and you're tired and you're looking at data all day. So then we'll go to compute, transform, compute. And you got to call it something. I usually just call it like parenting total, right? Because that's an easy way to, so I'll say parenting underscore total. You could give it a label. I usually know what that means, so I just like, pretty good. And then you got to know what the function is in SPSS. If you want to do an average, the function is mean, and if you want to add them up, the function is sum, right? So the fastest way to do it, and I think I might have included in here, but right here you go to function all, and then you basically, if you come down here, I know it's a mean, right? So I hit the M. It'll take me to the M's. And then I scroll down. This is the one I want, right? Mean. You can either arrow it up and it'll put it in there, or you can double click it. Either does the same thing, right? So I'm used to doing that. And then this is the formula, basically, it's saying in SPSS. Just tell me, in place of the question marks, put the variables you want, right? Just make sure there's paren around both of them, and then I'll run that function for you. So I find the easiest thing is just to come in here, delete those. I like variable names because I'm used to looking at it that way, right? 'Cause it's kind of hard. And if you double click or arrow over, I'm used to double clicking. You got 1, it wanted a comma. You do the next. It wants a comma. You do the next. It wants a comma. And then you're done. No comma after the last one, right? So you just put all the ones that you're sort of putting together. And then you could run it, but again, we paste it. I think I might have created one already, so we're just going to change the existing one, right? It happens to be here. Normally, it would dump, because it existed, it just replaced it. Normally, it would dump here, right, as a brand new variable. So I always just double click. I always just double check that hopefully it's something in the range, right? It looks like things are scores between 1 and 4. That's kind of what I wanted. It actually computed something. There's numbers in there. So that now represents for each person, right, their overall parental warmth score. This is the one that you end up using in analyses, right? Because that's sort of the, like, overall. So you guys will get, like, an extroversion score for each person, right? Or an introversion score for each person. Or a, right, sort of faculty support, right? Like, however many, you're going to average those scores. That'll get you there. And then there's one last command, right? And then we'll set you loose. Remember we talked about the scale reliability? For any time you have a multiple item measure, right? We're trying to get those Cronbach's alphas. And we want them close to 1, so things in the 0.9s are good, 0.8s are pretty good, 0.7 still okay, 0.6 starting to get a little fuzzy, 0.5s probably not acceptable, but then, you work with what you have, right? And as it gets lower, it basically means that those items kind of aren't hanging together so well. They might be kind of tapping into different things. So you guys have data now, and you have Cronbach's alpha maybe from like previous studies, right? So like, previous study said that these for self-esteem, it's usually around like 0.85. But now you get to look at it in your own data set, right? So It's really easy to run. It's in here too. You do analyze this time, scale, reliability analysis, and then the sheet will tell you that when you're in here, again, I'll go this way, you throw in all the individual items for that measure. You don't throw in the total score, right? So it's the 4 parental warmth measures, and use the recoded ones, right? Not the original ones. So again, because they're all organized down here, it makes it really easy, right? So I'm going to hit this first one. I'm going to hit shift. I'm going to hit that last one because I know those are the 4, right? If you set it up that way, it just makes it easy to run all these follow-up analyses. Alpha is what we want. And in statistics, the sheet tells you to click all 3 of these boxes, right? And I'll show you in a second. So you hit continue. I still like to paste these. At some point, you can copy and paste and move these things around, right? So maybe a whole section on recodes, maybe, whatever you want to do. But so this is the reliability analysis. I'm going to run it. Hopefully no error messages. I totally made these numbers up, right? So I'm not expecting this to actually have. So as you can see, it doesn't really have really good reliability. So if you look here, it gives you the cases. There's 42. 10 were excluded because they didn't have scores. This is a terrible, weird, negative alpha, right, that hopefully you guys won't be getting, but it does happen sometimes. Often when things like that happen, my first instinct is, like, did I, not recode something the way I was supposed to, right? You sort of think about some of the things that might have gone wrong. And the cool thing about this one, the convex alpha, if I'm deleted, that's one of those check boxes that you did, is that every now and then there's a variable or there's like one item that just kind of throws off the scale reliability. And all the others seem to be okay, but maybe like a scale of 10, one item. And it could be maybe like you were supposed to recode it and you didn't, right? But then it kind of throws it off. You'll be able to see right in here whether there's anything that does that. Because it basically says, like, if you delete this item, this is what the alpha will be. If you delete this item, this is what the alpha will be. Yeah.
And then how did you get that table? What did you know?
Oh, yep, under statistics. So analyze, scale, reliability, and that far right statistics one, right? Those 3 checks. And it's usually pretty cool because sometimes it'll be like, if you delete this one, the scale will be really, really high, 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 high. They're all high, right? Because these are all good items. And then every now and then there's like one that just like, if you took it out and let the other 9 live without that item, it like shoots it up to some like, right, like really, really high score. So we'll help you sort of, look at that kind of stuff and figure it out. But for the in-class assignment, we're asking you to do sort of a piece of each of those things. Right, so everybody gets practice at like recoding, figuring out which items you need to recode, actually doing those statements, creating a syntax file, right, where you actually get to recode, computing a sum mean score, and then actually running a few descriptives on it, right? So we asked you to pick up, to actually create like a mean score, right? So when I ran like analyze, descriptives, you can get sort of the mean score of like something, and then we actually run one of these, like a scale reliability analysis, right? So everybody gets practice. Because all of this is stuff, hopefully, like, right, once you get your data, you're going to be doing all of it. So we just want to make sure everybody feels comfortable with those sets. Okay, that's everything. All of it lives in here, right? So the examples, everything that I went through in different places. So we're going to set you loose, and then we'll float. We'll have today to do it. We'll have part of Monday. When everybody's finished with that, we'll move on to data, right? But until then, we'll keep going until everybody feels comfortable. And then we're off and running, right? Looking at our number, seeing what we have, seeing what's wrong with it. Okay, and the other is if you go to Canvas assignments, right? That's where this file lives, but then also the database to do it lives there too. So everybody try to, not till Monday. Oh wait, what's today? Today's right? So not till Monday. We'll do it maybe in the beginning of class. We'll just, yeah. So you don't have to do this over the, right, like over the weekend. But I would read this, right? So if this feels good, great. But everybody just read this, and Monday we'll come back and make sure everybody finishes. Probably midway through the class, because I feel like this shouldn't take more than that. We'll transition, and if people are ready, we'll transition earlier, right, and start pulling data down and starting to look. Yeah. But it won't be late, right? This will be. We'll keep doing it.
So if we're working on this on Monday, does that mean we meet here again on Monday?
Well, ideally, yes, but this room is booked. So the only room I could get, I'm going to check it on my way out. There's one in Bliss, and and there's one in the bio building. I think neither of them are ideal. I know. So I will email you what's going to happen because I'm not exactly sure. But when I went to reserve the rooms for data collection, those two were already reserved for something else. So I think Monday's the only day. So it may be one of those where like we might not even meet if both of those are terrible as a class, and I might just say work on this during the Monday, like finish it by the time we meet again on Wednesday. Because if we can't do this, I'm not sure how else we'll, yeah.
So what is due is the in-class data assignment.
Correct.
And then the class activity database.
That's part of it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's like, this is a
I know, I didn't print out the assignment. I'm sorry, I forgot to print that out. Kelly.
Going off with Samsung, so this was just like a mock example, like
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So this was just for demo purposes. But what you'll see in the in-class database, it's pretty similar. It's a very short data file though, right? Like there's only like maybe 8 variables or something. And so you're going to go through those steps though. It's a self-efficacy measure, right? You're going to try to figure out which of those need to be recoded. And then you're going to start creating these statements and syntax files. So we're asking you to submit a syntax file that will look pretty similar to this. The actual database, because once variables get recreated, right, I mean, we want to see kind of your recreated variables, and you're going to be obviously using it to do your stuff. And I think that's it. Those 2 files. And it's not due at the beginning of class. I can't remember the timestamp I put on it for Monday, but just know that we will work on it and finish it Monday, right? So, like, just come prepared. If you don't, with whatever you have, save your files so that you can reopen them on Monday, right? So maybe email them to yourself. If anybody uses the local drives, right, you can maybe save it to your own local folder on the drives. When you log in, I think they use those.
Do you want the output too or no?
I don't think I asked for the output, because I think I say in the syntax file, just put the descriptive statistics that you run. Mean score for total self-efficacy, and then also what your Cronbach's alpha is. Do I say output? Let me see. So that lives in the assignments, right? Oh, it's 12:15. Yeah, you can't even really start. But you can at least look at the files. Assignment, data, preparation, and analysis. In-class assignment. 2 files, right? You need to have 2 different files, SPSS database and SPSS syntax file. And I'll bring up a copy of this for everybody on Monday if we meet somewhere on campus. I know this would be the best lab, but we just can't get it. And we don't expect this to take too, right? Like once we start, this is not too difficult. We imagine you'll finish it on Monday and we can switch to other stuff. But make sure that everything that we covered, right? If you feel really, really rusty, then that's maybe something you could do over the break, right? Like over the next couple of days, just maybe get into a computer lab and play around with SPSS. Oh, the other thing is at the top of this file, it's always wonky. I feel like I've heard from every student, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Macs are always a little bit weird. But there is a place where you can download SPSS for home use on your computers. And then there's a place where you have to like set up a VPN. And right now there's all sorts of weird duo pushes and VPN stuff. If it works, great, and you can use it. Otherwise, we'll do our work here. But if you want extra practice, you might have to come grab a computer lab, right? Just get an SPSS and practice a little bit. All right, we're off and running. I would have canceled today, but I knew that on Monday I wasn't sure what kind of computer lab space we had, so I was like, we got to get in today to at least get this practice. And then worst comes to worst, you guys can do this independently with our, right, like our help on Monday if we can't actually get into a lab. I'll let you know as soon as I get over there after class today. It says in Book It, the capacity of the bio one, which is the one we have on Monday, is like 13 people. So I don't know what that means. Yeah, so if worse comes to worse, I feel like I can get it on mine and somebody can use it. I have another laptop from the lab I can bring if there's 13. I gotta look at it, and I couldn't get over there today because yes, that's what I'm thinking. The problem with that is that I'm assuming ZenWorks. I think that's campus wide, right? So, right, wherever you log on, if there's a ZenWorks, I say that now. I'm gonna go test it out. I'll see how it goes. All right, thanks everybody. It's good to see you. We'll keep working on Monday. Bye, Genesis. She has the pleasure of listening to this, at some point. I know. She's going to be like, what happened? I know. She's going to be like, I have no idea what's going on. You can email me.